When do you see what you define as digital superintelligence?
Within 10 years.
The AI's ability to generate its own scaffolding is imminent. Pretty much sure that that will be a 2025 thing.
We certainly don't know what superintelligence will deliver, but we know it's coming.
And what do people need to know about that?
You're going to have your own polymath. So you're going to have the sum of Einstein and Leonardo da Vinci in the equivalent of your pocket. Agents are going to happen. This math thing is going to happen. The software thing is going to happen. Everything I've talked about is in the positive domain, but there's a negative domain as well. It's likely, in my opinion, that you're going to see
Now that's a moonshot, ladies and gentlemen.
Everybody, welcome to Moonshots. I'm here live with my moonshot mate, Dave Blundin. We're here in our Santa Monica studios, and we have a special guest today, Eric Schmidt, the author of Genesis. We'll talk about China. We're going to talk about, digital superintelligence. We'll talk about, what people should be thinking about over the 10 years.
And we're talking about the guy who has more access to more actionable information than probably anyone else you could think of. So it should be pretty exciting.
Incredibly brilliant. All right. Stand by for a conversation with the Eric Schmidt, CEO or past CEO of Google, and an extraordinary investor and thinker in this field of AI.
Let's do it.
Eric, welcome back to Moonshots.
it's great to be here with you guys.
Thank you. It's been a long road since I first met you at Google. I remember our first conversations were fantastic. It's been a crazy month in the world of AI, but I think every month from here is going to be a crazy month. And so I'd love to hit on a number of subjects and get your take on them.
Of course.
I want to start with probably the most important point that you've made recently that got a lot of traction, a lot of attention, which is that AI is underhyped when the rest of the world is either confused, lost, or think it's, not impacting us. We'll get into it in more detail, but quick, most important point to make there?
AI is a learning machine.
Yeah.
And in network effect businesses, when the learning machine learns faster, everything accelerates. It accelerates to its natural limit. The natural limit is electricity.
Not chips.
Electricity.
Really? Okay. Yep.
But the fact of the matter is that the computing needs that we need now are going to come from traditional energy suppliers in places like the United States and the Arab world and Canada and the Western world. And it's important to note that China has lots of electricity. So if they get the chips, it's going to be one heck of a race.
Yeah, they've been scaling it, at 2 or 3 times the U.S. The U.S. has been flat for how long in terms of energy production?
From my perspective, infinite. In fact, electricity demand declined for a while, as has overall energy needs because of conservation and other things. Mm-hmm. But the data center story is the story of the energy people, right? And you sit there and you go, how could these data centers use so much power? Well, and especially when you think about how little power our brains do, well, these are our best approximation in digital form of how our brains work. But when they start working together, they become super brains. The promise.
I'm curious. There's so much capital being invested and deployed right now in SMRs, in nuclear, bringing 3 Mile Island back online, in fusion companies. Why isn't there an equal amount of capital going into making the entire, chipset and compute just 1,000 times more energy efficient?
There is a similar amount going in capital. There are many, many startups that are working on non-traditional ways of doing chips. The transformer architecture, which is what is powering things today, has new variants. Every week or so, I get a pitch from a new startup that's going to build inference time, test time, computing, which are simpler, and they're optimized for inference. It looks like the hardware will arrive just as the software needs expand. And by the way, that's always been true. We old timers had a phrase, Grove giveth and Gates take it away. So Intel would improve the chipsets, right? Way back when.
Yeah.
And the software people would immediately use it all.
Suck it
all up. Higher level code.
I have
no reason to believe that law, Grove and Gates law, has changed.
Yeah.
If you look at the gains in like the Blackwell chip or the the 350 chip in AMD, these chips are massive supercomputers. And yet we need, according to the people, have hundreds of thousands of these chips just to make a data center work. That shows you the scale of what this kind of thinking algorithms. Now you sit there and you go, what could these people possibly be doing with all of these chips? I'll give you an example. We went from language to language, which is what ChatGPT can be understood at, to reasoning and thinking. If you want to look at an OpenAI example, look at OpenAI O3, which does forward and back reinforcement learning and planning. Now, the cost of doing the forward and back is many orders of magnitude besides just answering your question for your PhD thesis or your college paper. That planning, the back and forth, is computationally very, very expensive. So with the best energy and the best technology today, we are able to show evidence of planning. Many people believe that if you combine planning and very deep memories, you can build human-level intelligence. Now, of course, it will be very expensive to start with, but humans are very, very industrious. And furthermore, the great future companies will have AI scientists, that is non-human scientists, AI programmers, that is opposed to human programmers, who will accelerate their impact. So if you think about it, going back to, you're the author of the abundance thesis, as best I can tell, Peter. You've talked about this for 20 years. You saw it first. Yeah. It sure looks like if we get enough electricity, we can generate the power in the sense of intellectual power to generate abundance along the lines that you predicted 2 decades ago.
Every week.
One of the things to say about productivity, and I call this the San Francisco consensus because it's largely the view of people who operate in San Francisco, goes something like this. We're just about to the point where we can do 2 things that are shocking. The first is we can replace most programming tasks by computers, and we can replace most mathematical tasks by computers. Now you sit there and you go, why? Well, if you think about programming and math, they have limited language sets compared to human language. Yeah. So they're simpler computationally, and they're scale-free. You can just do it and do it and do it with more electricity. You don't need data. You don't need real-world input. You don't need telemetry. You don't need sensors. Yeah. So it's likely, in my opinion, that you're going to see world-class mathematicians emerge in the next 1 year that are AI-based, and world-class programmers that are going to appear within the next 1 or 2 years. When those things are deployed at scale, remember, math and programming are the basis of kind of everything, yes. Right? Yep. It's an accelerant for physics, chemistry, biology, material science. So going back to things like climate change, can you imagine if we, and this goes back to your original argument, Peter, imagine if we can accelerate the discoveries of the new materials that allow us to deal with a carbonized world. Yeah. It's very exciting.
I'd love to drill in.
Okay, no, you first. I just want to hit this because it's important. The potential for there to be, I don't want to use the word PhD level, other than thinking in the terms of researchers, the PhD level AIs and that can basically attack any problem and solve it, and solve math, if you would, and physics. This idea of an AI, intelligence explosion. Leopold put that at like 26, 27, heading towards digital superintelligence in the next few years. Do you buy that time frame?
So again, I consider that to be the San Francisco consensus. Yeah. I think the dates are probably off by 1.5 or 2 times, which is pretty close. So a reasonable prediction is that we're going to have specialized savants in every field within 5 years. That's pretty much in the bag as far as I'm concerned.
Sure.
And here's why. You have this amount of humans, and then you add 1 million AI scientists to do something. Your slope goes like this, your rate of improvement. We should get there. The real question is, once you have all these savants, do they unify? Do they ultimately become a superhuman? The term we're using is superintelligence, which implies intelligence that beyond the sum of what humans can do. The race to superintelligence, which is incredibly important, Because imagine what a superintelligence could do that we ourselves cannot imagine, right? It's so much smarter than we. And it has huge proliferation issues, competitive issues, China versus the US issues, electricity issues, so forth. We don't even have the language for the deterrence aspects and the proliferation issues of these powerful models.
The imagination. Have you read the AI 27 paper?
I have.
And so for those listening who haven't read it, it's a future vision of the AI in US and China racing towards AI. And at some point, the story splits into we're going to slow down and work on alignment, or we're going full out. And, spoiler alert, in the race to infinity, humanity vanishes.
So the right outcome will ultimately be some form of deterrence and mutually assured destruction. I wrote a paper with two other authors, Dan Hendricks and Alex Wang, where we named it Mutual AI Malfunction. And the idea goes something like this. You're the United States, I'm China, you're ahead of me. At some point you cross a line. You, Peter, cross a line, and I, China, go, this is unacceptable. At some point, it becomes—
in terms of amount of compute and amount of—
It's something you're doing where it affects my sovereignty. Mm-hmm. It's not just words and yelling and an occasional shooting down a jet. It's a real threat to the identity of my country, my economic, what have you. Under this scenario, I would be highly tempted to do a cyber attack to slow you down, okay? In mutually assured malfunction, if you will, we have to engineer it so that you have the ability to then do the same thing to me. Mm-hmm. And that causes both of us to be careful not to trigger the other. Yeah. That's what mutual assured destruction is. That's our best formulation right now. We also recommend in our work, and I think it's very strong, that the government require that we know where all the chips are. And remember, the chips can tell you where they are because they're computers. Yeah. And it would be easy to add a little crypto thing, which would say, yeah, here I am, and this is what I'm doing. So knowing where the chips are, knowing where the training runs are, and knowing what these fault lines are very important. Now, there are a whole bunch of assumptions in this scenario that I described. The first is that there was enough electricity. The second is that there was enough power. The third is the Chinese had enough electricity, which they do, and enough computing resources, which they may or may not have.
Or may in the future have.
Yeah. And also, I'm asserting that everyone arrives at this eventual state of superintelligence at a roughly the same time. Again, these are debatable points. But the most interesting scenario is we're saying it's 1938. The letter has come, from Einstein to the president, and we're having a conversation, and we're saying, well, how does this end? Mm-hmm. Okay. So if you were so brilliant in 38, what you would have said is, this ultimately ends with us having a bomb, the other guys having a bomb, and then we're going to have one heck of a negotiation to try to make sure that we don't end up destroying each other. And I think the same conversation needs to get started now, well before the Chernobyl events, well before the buildups.
Google I/O was amazing. I mean, just hats off to the entire team there. VO3 was shocking. And we're sitting here 8 miles from Hollywood. And I'm just wondering your thoughts on the impact this will have. We're going to see the one-person feature film, like we're seeing potentially one-person unicorns in the future with agentic AI. Are we going to see an individual be able to compete with a Hollywood studio? And should they be worried about their assets?
Well, they should always be worried because of intellectual property issues and so forth. I think blockbusters are likely to still be put together by people with an awful lot of help by AI. Mm-hmm. I don't think that goes away. If you look at what we can do with generating long-form video, it's very expensive to do long-term video, although that will come down. And also there's an occasional extra leg or extra clock or whatever. It's not perfect yet. Mm-hmm. And that requires human editing. So even in the scenario where a lot of the video is created by a computer, there are going to be humans that are producing it and directing it for reasons. My best example in Hollywood is that, let's use the example, and I was at a studio where they were showing me this. they happened to have an actor who was recreating William Shatner's movements, a young man, and they had licensed the likeness from William Shatner, who's now older, and they put his head on this person's body, and it was seamless. Well, that's pretty impressive. That's more revenue for everyone. The unknown actor becomes a bit more famous. Mr. Shatner gets more revenue. The whole movie genre works. That's a good thing. Another example is that nowadays they use green screens rather than sets. And furthermore, in the alien department, when you have scary movies, instead of having the makeup person, they just add the makeup digitally. Mm-hmm. So who wins? The costs are lower. The movies are made quicker. In theory, the movies are better, right, because you have more choices. So everybody wins. Who loses? Well, there was somebody who built that set, and that set isn't needed anymore. That's a carpenter and a very talented person who now has to go get a job in the carpentry business. So again, I think people get confused. If I look at the digital transformation of entertainment, subject to intellectual property being held, which is always a question, it's going to be just fine, right? There's still going to be blockbusters. The cost will go down, not up, or the relative income, because in Hollywood they essentially have their own accounting and they essentially allocate all the revenue to all the key producing people. The allocation will shift to the people who are the most creative. That's a normal process. Remember we said earlier that automation gets rid of the lowest quality jobs, the most dangerous jobs. The jobs that are sort of straightforward are probably automated, but they're really creative jobs. Another example, the script writers, you're still going to have script writers, but they're going to have an awful lot of help from AI to write even better scripts. That's not bad.
Okay. I saw a study recently out of Stanford that documented AI being much more persuasive than the best humans.
Yes.
That set off some alarms. It also set off some interesting thoughts on the future of advertising. Any particular thoughts about that?
So we know the following. We know that if the system knows you well enough, it can learn to convince you of anything. Mm-hmm. So what that means in an unregulated environment is that the systems will know you better and better. They'll get better at pitching you. And if you're not savvy, if you're not smart, you could be easily manipulated. We also know that the computer is better than humans trying to do the same thing. Mm-hmm. So none of this surprises me. The real question, and I'll ask this in as a question, is in the presence of unregulated misinformation engines, of which there will be many, advertisers, politicians, just criminal people trying to evade responsibility. There's all sorts of people who have free speech. When they have free speech, which includes the ability to use misinformation to their advantage, what happens to democracy? Yeah. We've all grown up in democracies where there's a sort of a consensus around trust, and there's an elite that more or less administers the trust vectors and so forth. There's a set of shared values. Do those shared values go away? In our book about Genesis, we talk about this as a deeper problem. What does it mean to be human when you're interacting mostly with these digital things, especially if the digital things have their own scenarios? My favorite example is that you have a son or a grandson or a child or a grandchild, and you give them a bear, and the bear has a personality, and the child grows up, but the bear grows up too. So who regulates what the bear talks to the kid?
Most people haven't actually experienced the super empathetic voice that can be any inflection you want. When they see that, which will be in the next probably 2 months, they're going to completely open their eyes to what this is going to do.
Well, remember that voice casting was solved a few years ago, and that you can cast anyone else's voice onto your own. Yeah. And that has all sorts of problems.
Have you seen an avatar yet of somebody that you love that's passed away, or Henry Kissinger or anything?
Well, we actually created one with the permission of his family.
Did you start crying instantly?
It's very emotional. Yeah. It's very emotional because, it brings back, it's a real human. Yeah. It's a real memory, a real voice. And I think we're going to see more of that. Now, one obvious thing that will happen is at some point in the future, when we naturally die, our digital essence will live in the cloud, and it will know what we knew at the time, and you can ask it a question. Yeah. So can you imagine asking Einstein, going back to Einstein, what did you really think about, this other guy?
Yeah.
Did you actually like him, or were you just being polite with him with letters?
Yeah.
Right. And in all those sort of famous contests that we study as students, can you imagine being able to ask the people?
Yeah.
Today, with today's retrospective, what did you really think?
I know that the education example you gave earlier is so much more compelling when you're talking to Isaac Newton or Albert Einstein instead of just
You talk about,
it's so. So this is coming back to the VO3 and the movies. When one of the first companies we incubated out of MIT, Course Advisor, we sold it to Don Graham in the Washington Post, and then so I was working for him for a year after that. And the conception was, here's the internet, here's the newspaper, let's move the newspaper onto the internet. We'll call it WashingtonPost.com. And if you look at where it ended up, today with Meta, TikTok, YouTube, didn't end up anything like the newspaper moves to the internet. So now here's VO3, here are movies. You can definitely make a long-form movie much more cheaply. But I just had this experience of somebody that I know is a complete, this director will try and make a tearjerker by leading me down a 2-hour-long path, but I can get you to that same emotional state in about 5 minutes if it's personalized to you.
Well, one of the things that's happened because of the addictive nature of the internet is we've lost sort of the deep state of reading. Mm-hmm. So I was walking around and I saw a Barnes & Noble bookstore.
Still exists?
It was big.
Wow.
And I went, oh my God, my old home
Did you go
is back. And I went in and I felt good. But it's a very fond memory. But the fact of the matter is that people's attention spans are shorter.
Yeah.
They consume things quicker. One of the things interesting about sports is the sports highlights business is a huge business, licensed clips around highlights, because it's more efficient than watching the whole game.
Yep.
So I suspect that if you're with your buddies and you want to be drinking and so forth, you put the game on, that's fine. But if you're a busy person and you're busy with whatever you're busy of and you want to know what happened with your favorite team, the highlights are good enough.
Yeah, you got 4 panes of it going at the same time too.
And so this is, again, a change, and it's a more fundamental change to attention. Mm-hmm. I work with a lot of 20-somethings in research. And one of the questions I had is, how do they do research in the presence of all of these stimulations? And I can answer the question definitively. They turn off their phone.
Yeah.
You can't think deeply as a researcher with this thing buzzing. And remember that part of the industry's goal was to fully monetize your attention.
Yeah.
Right. We aside from sleeping, and we're working on having you have less sleep, I guess, from stress, we've essentially tried to monetize all of your waking hours with something, some form of ad, some form of entertainment, some form of subscription. That is completely antithetical to the way humans traditionally work with respect to long, thoughtful examination of principles, the time that it takes to be a good human being. These are in conflict right now. There are various attempts at this. So, my favorite are these digital apps that make you relax. Okay. So the correct thing to do to relax is to turn off your phone, right? And then relax in a traditional way for, 70,000 human years of existence.
I had an incredible experience. I'm doing the flight.
I want to take us in a direction of wrapping up on superintelligence and the book. We didn't finish the timeline on superintelligence, and I think it's important to give people a sense of how quickly the self-referential learning can get and how rapidly we can get to something, 1,000 times, 1,000,000, 1,billion times more capable than a human. On the flip side of that, Eric, when I look at my greatest concerns, when we get through this 5 to 7 year period of let's just say rogue actors and stabilization and such. One of the biggest concerns I have is the diminishment of human purpose. Mm-hmm. You wrote in the book, and I've listened to it. I haven't read it physically, and my kids say, you don't read anymore,
Low
Dad.
attention span.
You listen to books, you don't read. But you said the real risk is not Terminator, it's drift. Mm-hmm. You argue that AI won't destroy humanity violently, but might slowly erode human values, autonomy, and judgment if left unregulated, misunderstood. So it's really a WALL-E-like future versus a Star Trek boldly go out there.
We're very, in the book, and my own personal view, is it's very important that human agency be protected.
Yeah.
Human agency means the ability to get up in the day and do what you want, subject to the law, right? And it's perfectly possible that these digital devices can create a form of a virtual prison where you don't feel that you as a human can do what you want, right? That is to be avoided.
I'm not worried about that case. I'm more worried about the case that if you want to do something, it's just so much easier to ask your robot or your AI to do it for you. The human spirit that wants to overcome a challenge. I mean, the unchallenged life is so critical.
But there will be always new challenges. When I was a boy, one of the things that I did is I would repair my father's car, right? I don't do that anymore. When I was a boy, I used to mow the lawn. I don't do that anymore.
Sure.
Right? So there are plenty of examples of things that we used to do that we don't need to do anymore, but there'll be plenty of things. Just remember the complexity of the world that I'm describing is not a simple world. Just managing the world around you is going to be a full-time and purposeful job, partly because there will be so many people fighting for misinformation and for your attention, and there's obviously lots of competition and so forth. There's lots of things to worry about. Plus, you have all of the people, trying to get your money, create opportunities, deceive you, what have you. So I think human purpose will remain because humans need purpose.
Yeah, that's the point.
And there's lots of literature that the people who have what we would consider to be low-paying, worthless jobs enjoy going to work. So the challenge is not to get rid of their job; it's to make their job more productive using AI tools. They're still going to go to work. And to be very clear, this notion that we're all going to be sitting around doing poetry is not happening, right? In the future, there'll be lawyers. They'll use tools to have even more complex lawsuits against each other, right? There will be evil people who will use these tools to create even more evil problems. There will be good people who will be trying to deter the evil people. The tools change, but the structure of humanity, the way we work together, is not going to change.
Peter and I were on Mike Saylor's yacht a couple of months ago, and I was complaining that the curriculum is completely broken in all these schools. But what I meant was we should be teaching AI. And he said, yeah, they should be teaching aesthetics. And I looked at him like, what the hell are you talking about? He said, no, in the age of AI, which is imminent, look at everything around you. Whether it's good or bad, enjoyable, not enjoyable, it's all about designing aesthetics. When the AI is such a force multiplier that you can create virtually anything, what are you creating and why?
Well,
and that becomes the challenge.
If you look at Wittgenstein and the sort of the theories of all of this stuff, it is all fundamental. We're having a conversation that America has about tasks and outcomes. It's our culture. But there are other aspects of human life, meaning, thinking, reasoning. We're not going to stop doing that. So imagine if your purpose in life in the future is to figure out what's going on, and to be successful, just figuring that out is sufficient, because once you figured it out, it's taken care of for you.
That's beautiful.
Right? That provides purpose.
Yeah.
It's pretty clear that robots will take over an awful lot of mechanical or manual work. And for people who like to, I like to repair the car. I don't do it anymore. I miss it. Yeah. But I have other things to do with my
Purposeful.
time.
Yeah.
Take me forward. When do you see what you define as digital superintelligence?
Within 10 years.
Within 10 years. And what do people need to know about that? What do people need to understand and sort of prepare themselves for, either from as a parent or as an employee or as a CEO?
One way to think about it is that when digital superintelligence finally arrives and is generally available and generally safe, you're going to have your own polymath. So you're going to have the sum of Einstein and Leonardo da Vinci in the equivalent of your pocket. I think thinking about how you would use that gift is interesting. And of course, evil people will become more evil, but the vast majority of people are good.
Yes.
They're well-meaning, right? So going back to your abundance argument, there are people who've studied the notion of productivity increases, and they believe that you can get, we'll see, to 30% year-over-year economic growth through abundance and so forth. That's a very wealthy world. That's a world of much less disease, many more choices, much more fun, if you will, right? Just taking all those poor people and lifting them out of the daily struggle they have. That is a great human goal.
Let's
the goal. Focus on that.
That's the goal we should have. Does GDP still have meaning in that world?
If you include services, it does. One of the things about manufacturing, and everyone's focused on trade deficits and they don't understand, the vast majority of modern economies are service economies, not manufacturing economies. And if you look at the percentage of farming, it was roughly 98% to roughly 2 or 3% in America over 100 years. If you look at manufacturing, the heydays in the 30s and 40s and 50s, those percentages are now down lower than 10%. It's not because we don't buy stuff. It's because the stuff is automated. You need fewer people. There's plenty of people working in other jobs. So again, look at the totality of the society. Is it healthy? If you look in China, it's easy to complain about them. They have now deflation. They have a term where people are, it's called laying down, where they stay at home. They don't participate in the workforce, which is counter to their traditional culture. If you look at reproduction rates, these countries that are essentially having no children, that's not a good thing, right? Those are problems that we're going to face. Those are the new problems of the age.
I love that. Eric, so grateful for your time.
Thank you. Thank you both. I love your show.
Yeah. Thank you, buddy.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, guys.